What's happening, people? Welcome to the first ever Itchy Tasty video on the YouTube channel. It's been a while since I actually made the YouTube channel, so I need to get something up. I need to get some sort of video content up. It's not going to happen very often. The whole point of Itchy Tasty was to be more of a podcast feature, but I thought I may as well have a YouTube channel and I may as well do some videos that some people may want to watch, some Resident Evil fans may want to watch. Obviously, there's going to be like gameplays and stuff like that down the line when I get the time. But for now, I thought this would be a nice, easy one. A nice, quick and simple Resident Evil games ranked in the tier list thing, with where you do the lists in the tiers. So this clearly isn't every Resident Evil game ever made. There's bazillions of them. There's like weirdly so many Resident Evil games. But these are like, I think, what are considered the main ones. The main go-to ones that most people have played. And I'm going to just get started straight away. We'll get rid of the ones I haven't played. There are still a few games I haven't played. Despite this being a Resident Evil fancast where I'm a super duper fan who's played loads of Resident Evil. Which I have. I've played a lot of the same ones. I've not played every game. But there are some that I would love to delve into down the line, which is where the gameplays and stuff will come in. There's some I like. I'll go straight to the ones I've definitively not played. I have not played Resident Evil Dead Aim. I have not played the Outbreak games, which still pains me to this day that I've never played them. But I will find a way. Don't worry. I have not played the Chronicles. Where's the other one? Dark Side and Umbrella Chronicles. And that may be it. I've not played Gun Survivor 2. I have played all the others. So there we go. So there's 6 that I've not played. And mostly they're light gun shooters. Survivor 2, Chronicles, Dead Aim. I'm sure they're light gun shooters. Not my forte, not my cup of tea. Outbreak, absolutely my cup of tea. Just, I wasn't massive into horror when they came out. Obviously, I played the original Resident Evils, but I went through a bit of a phase where I was a bit of a scaredy cat and I weren't keen on horror. So Resident Evil was put on the back burner during like a certain portion of my youth. So it came around that time when Outbreak came. And it wasn't until Resident Evil 5 I got back into the series. Anyway, so I've got a goat. I've got a goat tier. Only one game belongs in the goat. I'm contemplating just doing it now. So, so we all know what the undisputed GOAT Resident Evil greatest of all time is. I'm going to do it. I'm not wasting a moment. Remake. The remake of the original Resident Evil from 2002, I think, is the greatest Resident Evil game of all time and still is. I'm not going to delve too deep into it. I want to keep this video quite simple, just so you guys have an idea of my history, taste in these Resident Evil games, considering I'm Itchy Tasty, the super fan channel, what's Maduda? Resident Evil Remake is the greatest Resident Evil game of all time. And then that takes us very nicely at the beginning, Resident Evil 1, which I have played a billion times. It is one of my favourites. It's absolutely amazing. It belongs in the amazing tier. And there's no point dilly-dallying, is there? 2 and 3. The original trilogy. All amazing. Having played them, I'd say fairly recently. 2, definitely. I've replayed 2. I replayed 2 when my son was born on my little handheld gadget, the old boy, as me and Nick call it. I played that when he was in the first few weeks of his life because, I had to watch him like a hawk. So whenever he was asleep, I jumped on Resident Evil 2. It is probably the superior one. Growing up, Nemesis was my favourite. I thought that was absolutely mind-blowing how good that game was. And it was the fact that it took you out of this one residence. You know, in the first one you had the mansion, in the second one you had the police station. 3, it was basically Raccoon City was the residence. And that blew my mind that you explored so much more of the streets and the back alleys and the shops and the hospital, and, you know, culminating at the factory and then the big explosions. It was mind-blowing. That was my favourite as a kid. And then as time went on, I really loved the first one. The first one is so good. The original Resident Evil. So creepy. It's the scariest of the 3. But I think the one that's held up the best by the year 2024, 2023, when I played it last, is Resident Evil 2. Is such a good game. Such a good game. And we'll obviously talk more about Resident Evil 2 and 3 a little bit later. Resident Evil Survivor is an odd one. It was basically what Resident Evil 1 was almost supposed to be, a first-person shooter or first-person horror adventure. I don't know what they would have called it back then. Resident Evil Survivor, I've played maybe a smidge of it. I've played a quarter. So I could easily put it in the haven't played bit, but I have played it. I'm inclined to put it in bum, just because it really didn't control well. The atmosphere wasn't quite the same. It's another one I will, for this channel, for Itchy Tasty, I am going to play it down the line when I get the chance, just to see how it's held up, because I'm probably talking a few years back I played this, and I just really didn't enjoy it. It was pretty bum. Next up, Resident Evil Code Veronica X, if you want to get technical about it. But Resident Evil Code Veronica was the next generation of Resident Evil. It was still fixed camera, but it was quite dynamic, which was really good. It was the first time it weren't pre-rendered backgrounds for Resident Evil. It was, you know, it was actually properly done. And it's absolutely amazing. I love Code Veronica. And I'm going to put it there, just below the original 3. But it is amazing. As mentioned in the podcast, hopefully you check it out. The podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms. It's also available here on YouTube for you to listen to if you want to listen to it. I have discussed Code Veronica and how I would like that to be the next remade Resident Evil game. I think it deserves a bit of the spotlight. I think it could do with getting a nice little touch-up to look really good. It's super creepy anyway, but they could make it even creepier with technology these days. Amazing soundtrack, just such a good game. Resident Evil Gaiden, belongs right next to Gun Survivor, even lower down. Resident Evil Gaiden's rough. Came out on the Game Boy Color, and it was the first Resident Evil set on a boat. And you control Barry Burton, from what I remember, who I absolutely love. But it's like a top-down explorative adventure thing, and then when it gives you the action sequences, it's all done in first person, and it's like the old golf games. You ever played the old golf games where you got the bar going across and you've got to time your button presses? It's like that, and you've got to time the buttons to shoot in the zombie accurately or something. It's really rough. Again, I'll probably play it. Like, these obscure Resident Evil games are the ones I want to be playing for the channel. More so than the main ones, because the main ones are too good, and I know them too well. But yeah, Gaiden, not great. I am willing to give it more of a chance down the line, and see if I can get it up from bum this time next year. We'll see. This time next year, I'll redo the tier list, see how many of the haven't played that I've played, and how many of the bum ones I give a chance to, and see if it get them up a bit. Resident Evil 0. Oh, I really want to say that I love Resident Evil 0, but there are little niggles to it which really bug me. Speaking of bugs, like every single boss enemy in the game is a bug. And the main antagonist in it is a bug, is Leech, the Leech Queen, Leech King, whatever he is. That was one of my big things, like the first boss is a giant scorpion, and then you fight like a giant centipede or something, and a big bat. It's not Resident Evil in that sense. The train sequence at the start is one of the best sequences in all Resident Evil games. So, if it started and ended on the train, potentially amazing, but I'm going to stick it in good. I'm going to stick Resident Evil in very high up in good. It's such a good game. Resident Evil 4, the original Resident Evil 4. Didn't play it when it came out. I missed the boat on it a little bit, again, through the period where I was a bit meh about horror games. And I heard so many amazing things about it, because I was one of those people where when it came out and it was over the shoulder, third-person view, I was like, that's not Resident Evil. That's not Resident Evil. Why are they doing that to Resident Evil? I was one of them people as well. Wasn't the reason I didn't play it, because down the line eventually I did play it because I wanted to play Resident Evil again. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm going to put it just ahead of Code Veronica, not ahead of the original 3. Massive game. Lot of action-orientated sequences to it. Towards the end of the game, Leon can end up with a massive arsenal of weapons. And it's just, a lot of people blame the next entry for being too action-y. I personally think 4 started it off, and 5 took a few pills, took a few steroids, and had a bit more fun with it. Speaking of, 5 is amazing, and here's a controversial take. Doom. Oh, I don't know how. I can't. I can put it ahead of 4. I can't put it ahead of the other 3. Absolutely love Resident Evil 5. It was my return to the series, maybe half a year after it came out. A year. I just saw it cheap in a shop one day and thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a bash. I haven't played Resident Evil for years, and I think it's going to be very good. I know Chris Redfield. It'll be a fun game. And it was. Massive emphasis on co-op. So if you've got a friend to play with, luckily I had my bestest bud in all the world, who also enjoys the game as much as I do. And we had an absolute blast. Playing it, replaying it, doing the DLC, playing it on professional. We smashed the game to bits. Absolutely loved it. And that's why I put it ahead of 4. I think 4 was the first one to overemphasize the action a bit. 5 just sort of like rolled with it and just had a bit more fun with it, if anything. And I respect and appreciate that about 5, sorry. Resident Evil 3. No, Resident Evil The Mercenaries 3D. Random game. Bit of a random game for the Nintendo 3DS. I got it day one because I was in a massive Resident Evil thing at this point in my time, in my life. And, from this point on, I smashed Resident Evil. I think this is a really good game, It is what it is. It's a Resident Evil mercenaries-based game. It's just a whole game of mercenaries. The online play was a bit dodge, but if you could get online, it massively helped with your building up your scores and stuff. I think you leveled up your characters and all kinds. Again, I'm not going to delve into it because it's a potential podcast for me in the future to talk about Mercenaries 3D. But for what it was on a handheld device, it was really good. I had a lot of fun on it, and I absolutely smashed it. Got Hunk. I always aim for Hunk in these games. If you unlock Hunk, you're doing well. Resident Evil Revelations is one of the finest Resident Evil games ever made. It would go ahead of RE4 fanboys. Revelations, I think, is a better game because it's spookier, it's scarier, it's much more impressive because it originally, again, came out on the 3DS. Thankfully ported to consoles. I think it was ported quite well to consoles. It didn't feel like a handheld experience when you were playing it on your console of choice. But it had its limitations, but it was still such a good game. Really creepy campaign. And the raid mode, all about raid mode. So good. Raid mode is phenomenal. A great addition to the series. It's better than the Mercenaries for me. And I wish they'd delve more into raid mode, to be honest. But it seems to be a Revelations only mode. Now we're getting funky. Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. I remember watching and rewatching the trailer for this so many times because it looked really good. It had so much potential. And then it came out and it's pretty bum. It's not great. Not as bad as the other two in the bum section, but it felt like wasted potential. Again, like 5, I think if you've got pals to play with, you can probably have quite a bit of fun on it. But yeah, I remember I pretty much played it solo. I did what I could on it. It just felt like a bit of a grind, bit rough. Yeah, you can see what they were trying to do with certain portions of it, which I think they incorporated better into future games. But yeah, it wasn't great. Speaking of not great, Resident Evil 6. Another one. I watched and rewatched the trailer for this 1 billion times because I was so excited. Since I got back into it on RE5, we'd gone through how many spin-off games, Revelations, Mercenaries, Operation Raccoon City, until we finally got the 6th big entry, which was the first one where you had Leon, Chris Redfield, and they were all coming together. It's decent, and that's me being nice. Resident Evil 6 is decent. There's a lot of content to it. Leon's campaign's alright. It's the most Resident Evil-ish, especially the beginning of it, but it quickly descends into action. Again, Chris Redfield's story, massive emphasis on action, but at least they sort of go balls to the wall with the Chris story. I always feel like with the Leon stories, they want to keep it creepy, but they want the action sequences so he can do his John Wick stuff and his backflips and his suplexes, but it just doesn't quite fit for me. At least Chris Redfield is what he is. He's, big buff army man who just shoots loads of weapons and kills zombies. So they always sort of delve into that with Chris, which they did in 6, and it did work to an extent. And then the Jake and Sherry story is just not amazing. Yeah, the Mercenaries mode on it was alright. I played a bit with a mate of mine. All the added gubbins, it's like they just tried throwing too much onto it and it just didn't work. Decent. Resident Evil Revelations 2 wasn't a patch on the first Revelations for me. It just felt a bit rough, and it just disappointed me a bit because Revelations was a handheld game ported to consoles, and it controls well. Revelations 2 was a console game, I'm assuming it was PC as well, but it was a console experience, and it still kind of just felt like a handheld experience, if you get me. It just felt a bit rough. I'm not going to crap on it too much, because again, saved by raid mode, so I'll put it mid-tier good. It's still a good game. Decent story. Really good characters. Claire Redfield and Barry Burton are your main boys in it, and then their partners. Moira Burton and the little girl with Barry, I can't remember her name. But then this is where they all really started delving into supernaturally stuff as well, which I'm not a massive fan of, but there you go. Umbrella Corps is the bummiest of the bums. Wow, Umbrella Corps is not a good game, and we're going to leave it at that. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Their first proper foray into first-person horror. Forget about the light gun games, forget about Survivor and all that. This was their first proper attempt at first-person horror, and it's so good. It is amazing. I would probably maybe bottom end of amazing. I prefer all the others that are in the list. But the first person thing, I like the gimmick of it to begin with. There's nothing more scary than you being in that perspective of, you're seeing through the character's eyes. You are this character. You are controlling this character, And all the spookums and stuff are stuff that you have to deal with because it's right in your face. That aspect of it is really good. Again, it slowly descends a bit into a first-person shooter. Not as bad as a later entry, but it does do that. And that's when it feels a little less Resident Evil-y. But yeah, it's still overall an amazing game. You can't deny that. Right, Resident Evil 2 Remake. The first real competition here for these boys. Ooh, I may do that. Resident Evil 2 Remake is a masterpiece of survival horror. It's so good. Given how amazing the original game is, this remake had no right to be at least equally as good as the original. Probably my biggest gripe on it, which I'll delve into down the line when I do a podcast about it, is that the B scenario, the second campaign that you get to play, it felt a little too much like the first campaign. Whereas in the original, the B scenario felt like a separate thing. So, again, I'll delve into that more in the future when I talk about the game more in depth. But yeah, Resident Evil 2 is absolutely outstanding. It's such a good game. Really creepy. Controls beautifully. Looks amazing. Awesome soundtrack. Great game. Resident Evil Resistance, I only played a little bit of it. I think it was the thing that came out just before 3, or did it come alongside with 3? I can't remember. It's just like it was like their attempt at like a Left 4 Dead-y sort of thing, maybe. I can't remember. And you got a bad guy that I think someone controls the bad guy. Is it like that? Evolve, was it called? The 4v1, 3v1 thing? It's like their attempt at that in the Resident Evil universe for some reason, with no characters that anyone knows, unless it's Wesker. Is Wesker I don't remember. It wasn't great. I don't want to say it was bum, but it might have been bum. I only played it a couple of times. It must have been bum. I'll maybe put it... I definitely enjoyed Raccoon City a bit more, to be fair. Yeah, bum. Resident Evil 3 Remake. Not a patch on Nemesis, but I still really, really, really enjoyed this game. Where would I put it? It's not a patch on RE2. Again, it was massively focusing on the action elements of the game, which, it kind of has to. It's Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. You got the Nemesis character stalking you. It's a shorter campaign than most. I'm not going to be one of those guys that has a pop at it because it's short. It's not short, it's just shorter than other games. And it's only the sad speedrunner, super, people that want to get through games fast, which I don't understand. Go down that rabbit hole one day. I like sitting, chilling, and enjoying my video games. I don't know if I can put it ahead of Code Veronica, I'd put it ahead of 7, though. It's just the first person thing was 7. That's the only thing. Yeah, it is amazing. It's so good. It's one of the ones I'm really wanting to jump back in at the minute. I've recently played... Which ones have I recently played? I played Separate Ways. I played Resident Evil 4's Separate Ways DLC, and I've recently just finished Resident Evil Village, which I'm about to talk about. And I'm currently going through the DLC for that, Shadows of Rose. So after that, I may have a wee break from Resident Evil. But then Resident Evil 3 is in contention for being the next game that I want to play again, because it's been a while. I just think that there's some awesome moments in that game. Jill Valentine's my favourite Resident Evil character. I think she's just the OG for me. I love Jill. She's no nonsense, hardcore badass. Love Jill. And we're almost at the end. Resident Evil Village. I have recently finished, as I just said, Resident Evil Village from start to finish. I thoroughly enjoyed it. To keep it brief, before I do, because down the line I've got mega notes for a review that I want to do in the near future. To keep it brief, Resident Evil Village is an amazing game, but I don't think it's a great Resident Evil game. It just doesn't feel enough like a Resident Evil game. With the fact that the main enemy, you know, the grunts in the game are lycans, are werewolves. You got Lady Dimitrescu, who's an awesome character, everyone loves her, but, you know, vampire sort of thing. It's delving into other sort of folklore as opposed to, you know, Resident Evil is zombies to me. That is what Resident Evil should always have, zombies. I think that is the core element of a Resident Evil game. Undead monsters, zombies, not so much werewolves and, you know, vampires and lycans and whatever else. I want weird mutated monsters and stuff, not fairy tale creatures, you get me? But still an amazing game. Ooh, we'll put it there. Bottom of amazing. 7's just more of a Resident Evil game. Slower, creepier. Beginning hour, the demo that came out was also amazing. Such a good sort of preview of what Biohazard became. Reverse, whatever it's called. PvP multiplayer shooter thing. It's actually not that bad. I wouldn't put it in bum. I'd actually put it in decent. I remember having a bit of fun on it. But yeah, it's not the right game for Resident Evil. You get me? It's not what I want to be jumping on in the world of Resident Evil, a PvP shooter thing. It's cool that you can mutate into monsters and stuff, but meh. I actually quite liked the look of it as well, because it had like that sort of comic booky effect where, you know, everything's sort of like jumping out at you a little bit. It was really cool. And then we finish it off with Resident Evil 4, the remake. Ooh, the big question. It is amazing. And 4, separate ways alone, it goes ahead of Resident Evil 4. Is it better than Revelations? Yes, probably. Is it better than 5? Oh, I had more fun on 5, but that's because of being with best friend. Yeah, I'm probably gonna put it ahead of 5 just because it had the spookums. It finally, you know, not the original Resident Evil 4 wasn't creepy. Remake was just able, because of the advancement in technology and that. I don't think a remake was necessary for 4, but they did such a fine job on it. Like, just the way it looks, the controls, the environments, the atmosphere. Certain moments of it are really creepy and just really moody, and the dark bits are actually dark. Whereas it wasn't quite like that in RE4, because, you know, you're talking 20 years ago, was it? 2004, 2005 or something like that, RE4. So yeah, little aspects of it, including Separate Ways, which is a paid for DLC. In the original, it was part of the game, so it was like a little addition to the original, whereas this Separate Ways DLC for the remake was like, it was a big chungus bit of extra game to play, and it was so good. And that's my Resident Evil tier list. That is the official Itchy Tasty Resident Evil tier list. Right, so from the bottom, we have the games I haven't played, so Survivor 2, Code Veronica, Darkside Chronicles, Umbrella Chronicles, Outbreaks 1 and 2, and Resident Evil Dead Aim. The bum games, starting from the bottom, the bummest of the bums, Umbrella Corps. And then we've got Resident Evil Gaiden, Resident Evil Survivor, Resident Evil Resistance, and Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. And then we're up to decent. Reverse, I don't know what it's called. Resident Evil 6. The good games, Resident Evil The Mercenaries 3D, Resident Evil Revelations 2, Resident Evil 0. And then the amazing games, we got Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil 7, Biohazard, Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil Code Veronica X, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Revelations, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Resident Evil 1996, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, Resident Evil 2 Remake, and the OG Resident Evil 2. And then the undisputed GOAT of the series, Remake, Resident Evil 2002. So let me know what you guys think. Everyone's got a tier list in them, haven't they? So what's your GOAT Resident Evil game, and which of your bums are the bums? Let me know. I hope you've all enjoyed listening to me waffle on about this series. Get used to it if you're subscribing, because this channel's all about Resident Evil. So get subscribing on this YouTube channel and check us out on all the podcasting platforms. Check out our Buzzsprout page, itchytasty.buzzsprout.com, and pick the podcasting platform that suits you best. You can also find us on X, formerly Twitter, and we're also on TikTok. That's at itchytastypod. So check us out and get following, get subscribing. I shall see you all very soon. Cheers, guys. Ta-ra.